Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Reese.
And you're listening to Charismatic Megafauna. So before we get started with the content today, we just have a couple of housekeeping things we want to go over. First of all, we want to thank everybody who's been with us from the beginning as we maneuver through different types of podcasting hosts.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It turns out that you can only get so far trying to podcast for free.
Yeah, which we learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going to be moving to Podbean, which probably means nothing to any of you, but it does mean that we will be on iTunes as we finish up our first season, and you'll be able to find us on places like Google Podcasts and Podcast Addict and stuff like that, and all of our podcasts will finally be in one place.
Yep, it'll be all consolidated, a lot easier to manage and find all the episodes.
Right. That being said, we are coming up. This is our final content-driven episode of Season 1.
Of the first part of Season 1.
Right. So we will release a corrections episode in a couple of weeks, just like we always do. But then we're going to take a month off, and we'll be back in May with part 2 of Season 1. Mm-hmm. So our intention is to have 3 sub-seasons per year, but to take the month of April and I believe the month of September off.
Yeah, I think September is right.
Yeah. And then we'll take off a month at the end of the year for holidays and other fun traveling things to see family. But that just gives us time to produce the best possible content for everybody without having to take awkward breaks because we're overwhelmed with things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so look forward to finding us on like real podcasting places instead of just these random things.
Yeah.
Which actually leads me into the next little bit of business, which is if you're not following us on social media, first of all, how did you find us? You must be an expert podcast listener if you found us, but you don't know anything about our social media presence.
Yeah, or you're our older family members.
We love you.
Yes.
We know we've had to send literal links to all of you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for listening, Nani.
However, please check us out on social media because you get to see sort of what we're up to. We post pictures from the days that we record. You get occasional animal pictures from our house, which is always fun. Who doesn't love pet pics?
Yeah.
Anyways, we do have a really awesome social media presence. So you can find us on Instagram at CMF Podcast, on Facebook at CMF Podcast. But we also built a beautiful website, which is just cmfpodcast.com. Mm-hmm. And I think what's the coolest thing about our website is it gives a little bit more about us as people. And then we post random cool videos. We have intermittent blog posts about sort of what our friends in this field are doing. There's some really cool tech articles we've posted. It's just a really cool way to get a little bit of extra content from us when we aren't putting out podcasts.
Yep. Plus it links you directly to all of the social media accounts, and it will get you to the podcasting platform.
Oh, yeah. Which reminds me, we also have a Twitter. Again, at CMF Podcast on Twitter.
Do we?
We do. I don't really know how to use Twitter, so I post that we release new episodes just in case there's people out there trying to find podcasts on Twitter.
Okay.
But I think as we go further through this and as we hopefully start to make even just like a minuscule amount of money in podcasting, I'll be able to dedicate that time to learning Twitter.
Sure. A worthy cause.
Yes. However, right now we're really relying on all of you.
Yeah.
If all of you could just tell your friends how much you love our podcast, even if it's a lie, please do it.
Yeah, it's a grassroots campaign. The best way to build this up absolutely is you guys and the word of mouth factor.
Yeah.
And like Kelsey said earlier, for everybody who's supported us from the beginning, thank you so much for doing that this whole time. We really appreciate it.
We do. One final point of business. We will be taking the month of April off from regular scheduled programming. However, we will be doing a crossover episode with Wine and Wine.
Yeah.
Who is a fabulous podcast, also out of the Twin Cities, with 2 wonderful women. Anyways, Thank you so much for being with us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for putting up with all of these announcements that we've been meaning to make for the last 5 podcasts and have just gotten to now.
Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful.
If not, we're heading into our regular scheduled programming. So here we go. What I learned this week is...
Well, wait a second.
What?
I didn't get to ask you.
Sorry.
That's one of my favorite parts.
Okay.
Okay, ready? Hey, so Kelsey,
Hey, what?
what did you learn this week?
What I learned this week is a little all over the place, because what I really want to be doing and incorporating more into the podcast is feel-good news stories. And not just news stories that exist that somebody wrote to be feel-good, quote unquote, but actual awesome progress that we are making as cultures across the world.
Yeah, I think we all need that right now.
Yeah. So I have 4 feel-good news stories.
Sure.
I would like to do 3 of them now, and I would love to end the podcast with one.
Cool.
So I'm going to start with one that relates to our topic last week, the parasites topic. But then after that, which one do you want to save towards the end?
Okay.
We have a humanitarian one. We have a awesome one about renewable energy.
Okay.
And then cool new tech.
You know what? I would actually say renewable energy.
That's what you want to end on?
Yeah.
Cool. That's good because it's just a little blip. We can just toss it in at the end.
Perfect.
So what I want to start with is we were talking about parasites last week or on the last podcast. And what I mentioned was that worms and things like worms cause a lot of problems for people around the world, especially worms that are gathered from water. What I learned is that there's a company, I believe it's called Evidence Action, who is working in Kenya. And for the last 5 years, they've worked with the government to deworm about 6 million children a year.
Whoa.
So that's as simple as they get a pill or a series of pills that help deworm them. Now, this is huge because in places like Kenya, where a lot of children are susceptible to being infected by worms, they end up missing a lot of class. They're home because they're sick, they're not feeling well, they might be ill enough that they don't have the option to go to school. But this company has been able to treat, like I said, 6 million children a year for the last 5 years at a cost of less than 50 cents a child.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That's extremely cool. How do they manage that?
I believe they're on the ground with these pills, and they're I know they work with the government. So I think that it's a program that's introduced into the schools to try and get young children through the school system.
Sure.
But the really cool bit of news is that they have reduced the number of children infected from 33% in 2012 to only 3% in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. So they've done some really good work. And like I said, it's reached a point now where a lot of school-aged children are being able to come back to school. They're taking a lot less time off. And they're doing great.
Good. That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, great job, Kenya, and whatever the name of that.
The name of the group that's helping?
Yeah. What's the name?
It's Evidence Action.
Evidence Action.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they actually have an initiative called Deworm the World, which is awesome.
Catchy.
Yeah. Little weird, I think, for people who don't understand the dangers of worm-based infections, but
Yeah. But good work
Yeah.
that they're doing.
so awesome.
Yeah, impressive.
All right, our next feel-good story, because you said you want to save climate energy or renewable energy,
Yeah.
good climate things till the end. Okay.
Yeah.
The second little bit of good news is about black men in the U.S. So the share of black men in poverty has fallen from 41% in 1960 to 18% today.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So that's more than half of a reduction.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But I think what's more important and makes me feel even better than that is that the number of black men who have risen to the middle or upper class went from 38% to 57% today.
No kidding.
Yeah. So that means like half of black men in America have reached the middle class or higher.
That's fantastic.
That's great news.
Problem solved. Racism gone.
Nope. I was just going to say, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that black men aren't still facing insane things in our country.
No, absolutely not.
But that's awesome.
And, of course, black women.
Of course, yeah. And I couldn't find numbers on poverty rates
Yeah.
and middle and upper class on black women. But we do know that black men are doing well.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that progress is important to
It's
keep
super
that ball
important.
rolling.
It was also really cool because in this article that I was reading about it, the author posited that these rises might help to reduce prejudicial views of black men in society. Because especially in the 60s, black men had there were really negative views of black men by, I'm sure, a large portion of white America.
Yeah.
But by seeing black men in these variety of jobs and reaching the middle and upper class, I think that maybe that can help to address some of the racism that people feel.
I see. So it was kind of a confirmation bias thing where because they were oppressed, they were viewed as lower income, and because they were viewed as lower income, they couldn't advance, kind of thing.
Probably weren't given as many opportunities. Yeah.
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 Well, it definitely sounds like this is a positive change.
Yeah. And there was a cool portion again in the article where the author said that they were hopeful that this would be a really cool change for young black men.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that I can speak with a lot of authority on, but it was still just a really cool article to read.
Yeah. I mean, and, part of it, too, is it has been 60 years almost.
Yeah.
Which change should happen in that amount of time. Significant change.
Yeah. And some might argue that we have not made enough change.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that.
Yeah.
But it's still great. Progress is still progress.
Yeah, this isn't nothing for sure.
All right, moving on to our next one. This is my favorite one. This is the last one we're going to talk about before we go into our main topic.
Okay.
This is about System 001.
Okay.
Which is a new piece of technology that was launched on September 8th of last year in San Francisco. It's basically a big net. I'm oversimplifying it, and if anybody is listening who loves System 001, I'm sorry. I got a limited amount of time to talk about it.
A net, like a literal net, like a fishing net?
Like a fishing net. However, it exists to prove the concept of the ocean cleanups technology in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is a huge piece of garbage floating between Hawaii and California. So this thing, which, like I said, is literally just a system of nets, is estimated to remove half of the Pacific Garbage Patch in just 5 years.
Holy cow.
And basically, it just floats at the surface with a skirt below, and the skirt catches plastic.
Is this... I think I saw a story about this. Didn't some kid invent something like this?
There is an invention that a kid did create, but it's a lot smaller.
Okay.
So this thing, it looks like it's huge.
Similar concept, though?
But it is a similar concept, yeah. It using the currents of the ocean, it floats along and scoops up plastic trash. Well, any trash, but plastic trash is really what we're concerned about in the oceans.
Yeah. Wow.
It's so cool.
That's extremely cool. And so have they implemented that yet?
They have. So they launched it in September in San Francisco.
Right on.
And something cool about it that I think is that it's energy neutral. So once they released it into the ocean, it's run just by the waves and the wind.
Okay. So we don't have to expend any energy to use it.
Right.
Okay.
And all of the electronics in it, such as like the lights and stuff like that, are powered by solar energy.
Good thinking.
It's so cool.
Yeah. Is there a picture of this?
I've seen a lot of... I can pull up a picture of what the above ocean portion looks like.
Oh.
And it literally just looks like a tube.
Looks like a tube with some maybe propellers.
No.
No, I'm just an idiot. I don't know what I'm looking at.
But I can show you a rendering of what it looks like.
Okay. Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Yeah.
I see what it is.
It's basically like if you attached a net to a pool noodle and just set that pool noodle off.
Yeah.
But times 100. It's a lot bigger than that.
Cool. We should post a picture.
We absolutely will. We'll post a picture so that you can see what this looks like. I'll probably link you to their website because heck yes.
Yeah, definitely. That's super
so cool.
Well, those are great stories. I can't wait for the last one, but the three of those stories are fantastic.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Yeah, they make me feel really good. So mission accomplished.
Awesome. And like I said, my intention is to continue to do this and maybe just have a little segment at the very end where I give you just a quick little blip about good things that are happening in the world.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, I need to focus on the good sometimes.
Yeah, and we tend to end on downers sometimes.
Yeah, what is with that?
I don't know.
It isn't intentional.
No.
Today's going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. We intentionally wanted to pick some more fun, lighter subjects to end the first part of the season on.
So our main topic for today is a little bit different than what I usually do, but it's all going to tie in.
Okay.
Things feel different, but everything's the same.
I don't know what that means.
Don't worry about it. So the topic that I was really excited to learn about and that I really wanted to explore a bit more is covered in this paper by Sarah Grossa da Silva and Jamshid Tehrani. The name of the paper is called Comparative Phylogenetic Analyses Uncover the Ancient Roots of Indo-European Folktales. I'm going to link you the scientific paper. I'm going to tell you right now, it's heavy.
It sounds pretty dense.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
But it's heavy.
An interesting topic. Folktales.
Folktales. So the basics with this is that folktales like Beauty and the Beast can be traced back thousands of years. And we're going to talk about what these scientists did in their paper and what the data they presented was. And then we're going to go into it a little bit more in relation to how old some fairy tales are and sort of what the prevailing thoughts were until this paper was released.
Awesome.
It's super cool. So they use techniques that were normally employed by biologists. That's what I meant when I said it's different, but it's the same.
Okay.
Because this is still tied to biological phenomena, which to me was insanely cool. They used quantitative phylogenetic methods that were initially developed in biology, and they used them to investigate the relationships between population histories and a number of cultural phenomena. So they didn't do this themselves, but this method has been used to investigate things like languages, marriage practices, political institutions, material culture, music, the list goes on, and how those things have changed through history.
Huh.
Right. So following these prior comparative studies of cultural traits, they used language trees as a model for population histories, and they based them on verbal tradition. So that's all pretty heavy stuff.
Sure.
But what I mean basically is that they took different versions of these stories and traced them back across the landscape and into what essentially was a phylogenetic tree. So their intention was to trace it back to a point in history where that story began. And then as that story developed and split into new cultures, it created this tree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So is that sort of tracing like the lineage of different people groups?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's the same concept, but instead of doing it with genetics, they're doing it with stories.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, anyways. So the way that they tested this is, like I said, they took similar stories from across Europe and Asia, and then they used specific statistical analyses to determine if the similarities between these stories arose through random chance. So basically, all of these industries or all of these communities existed, and because they existed, they told stories that ended up being similar. Or if these stories were transmitted through distinctive word of mouth stories. So it's like an animal changes slowly through evolution, like I said. You can trace mammals back to this tiny mouse-like creature that then split and grew into things crazy like giraffes and lions and humans and an insane diversity of different species. Like animals change in this way, they found that stories do as well, and that you can find marked changes in these stories by going back and examining them.
Yeah.
So what they found is that a substantial number of magic tales have existed in Indo-European oral traditions long before they were first written down. And I took this quote from Sarah because it was so interesting to me. These stories have been told since before even English, French, and Italian existed. They were probably told in an extinct Indo-European language. So these stories don't even just transcend time and culture, they transcend existing language. Wow. They were transmitted and translated and spread through multiple cultures, multiple languages, multiple times.
Crazy.
Bizarre. All right, so that's sort of the paper basics. And now we can get into more of the plain speak.
Sure.
So I mentioned we were going to talk about the context a little bit. And that leads us back to, can you take a guess? The context for fairy tales?
I don't know. Can you give me a hint?
Yes. Who created a big exhibition of fairy tales? They traveled across Germany, I think, and wrote down as many folk stories as they could collect.
Oh, are you talking about the Brothers Grimm?
I am.
Oh.
Yes. And I know how you love the Brothers Grimm.
I do.
Who played them in the movie? Heath Ledger and Matt Damon? That's wrong.
No, I think it was Matt Damon.
Was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, that leads us to the Brothers Grimm, and specifically Wilhelm Grimm. Now, he believed that stories were ancient, and these sources of stories ranged from across Europe and South Asia. And generally, he was dragged for this. He was pretty ridiculed for believing that these stories had existed for so long. I couldn't really find a reason why, but even up until this paper was published, most scholars, and even now, some scholars, believed that these stories formed when mass printing began. Now, this paper came out in 2016. It's a pretty recent paper.
Sure.
But it's interesting to me that scientists and cultural scientists who studied the histories of these ancient civilizations and through sort of the settlements and becoming Indo-European and Germanic and tribal and all of those wonderful things, that they didn't think that maybe there were stories that had been passed through oral tradition for hundreds of years.
That seems like a pretty reasonable idea.
It does. And there were some stories where scientists believed 100% that they had been passed down through oral tradition. So it was interesting to me that most scholars believed that these stories existed maybe from the 1700s, maybe even as early as the 1500s. And then they were written down, I believe, in the 1700s by the Grimm brothers. Now, something else that really caught my eye about this is that theoretical studies of the evolution of cultures suggest that diversity is often shaped by transmission bias. So what I mean by that is a fear of new cultures and the desire to conform. So because of that, the transmission of ideas is really inhibited between groups that are neighbors. So the local distinctions are a lot of times preserved, and neighborhood distinctions, the distinctions of the next door tribe, are vilified. And cultures don't want to preserve any of the cultural histories of their neighbors.
Because they think it'll dilute their own.
Right.
Okay.
Which, because of that, that would support the idea that these stories were not being transmitted, that they weren't from one source and had spread across Europe and Asia, that instead they were from tribes and they were convergent. They were stories that shared similar themes that just popped up because they all were trying to teach a lesson, basically. Yeah. It was interesting to me that these stories were so robust that they were traveling over neighboring cultures and through neighboring cultures. So although neighborhood stories could easily exchange the cultural aspects and the stories and different customs, instead they rejected these customs and these tales. Just like you said, they didn't want to dilute their own.
Yeah.
Now, in this paper, they found that there were several stories that were less likely to appear in one population if they were told in an adjacent one. So everything I've said has just sort of been anecdotal, but this is a legitimate scientific basis for it. That if you have a story that was really well loved in one group, the neighboring group almost always rejected it. Right. So now we can get into how old fairy tales actually are. So do you have a guess for how old you think Beauty and the Beast and Rumpelstiltskin are?
Are they the same age, or
They're in the same range
Okay.
of age, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say, we'll say 2,500 years.
Nice. That is the very low end of the range.
Really?
The range is 2,500 years to 6,000 years, with them believing that it falls probably around 4,000 years ago.
Okay. That's a pretty wide range.
It is. So they believe that it existed 4,000 years ago, but because of their sample size, they have to have a pretty big window so that they can remain confident in their results.
Sure.
But yeah, they believe it centers on about 4,000 years old.
That's old. I assumed that it was, in the 80s or 90s, whenever the Disney movie came out.
That's the true Beauty and the Beast. Anything else that came before it was just convergent.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I literally didn't know that it was a folktale. I thought it was just a Disney movie.
That's fair. Almost every Disney movie is based on a folktale.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite one, this is a tangent, but we're going down this walk.
Your favorite Disney movie?
My favorite Disney movie that's based on a story, an existing fairy tale, is probably The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid story is horrifying.
Yeah.
And Disney turned it into just this beautiful little redhead who sells her voice for legs.
Yeah.
Everything's great. She marries the prince, whatever. In the actual original Germanic version, I believe she does still sell her voice to get legs, but the sea witch doesn't give her legs. She just cuts her tail in half and tosses her on land. And of course, Ariel can't walk on her mutilated fins. Eric comes across her, the prince comes across her.
Sure, yeah.
And is horrified and disgusted by this weird mutilated half-human thing, which you could do better, Prince Eric.
Yeah.
Help out the poor fish person who's clearly in pain. But I want to say there was a part even where she's trying to scream out in agony and she can't because the sea witch has stolen her voice. In this experience with Eric, where he abandons her because he finds her disgusting, she becomes so upset that she turns into the sea foam in the ocean. And that's the end of the story.
What?
Yeah.
Man, they really knew how to spin a yarn.
Yeah.
Those Germans. Keep it light. Rule number 1.
Wow.
Yikes. What's the moral of that one?
Men will only disappoint you.
I feel like it's probably be careful what you wish for.
That'd be a good moral.
That's my takeaway
Yeah.
from your abridged version just now.
I could be totally wrong on that. Maybe in the corrections episode, I'll just read the story because I think it's only like 3 pages. And I'm sure it's in our Brothers Grimm book.
Yeah.
Back onto the normal path. So, Jack and the Beanstalk, which is rooted in a group of stories classified as The Boy Who Stole the Ogre's Treasure, which I think is the original Jack and the Beanstalk story and just sort of how it developed through time. It's now Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay.
But this one could be traced back to when Eastern and Western Indo-European languages split. Now, that split happened, as we know, over 5,000 years ago.
Wow.
And I believe they said it could have happened up to 2,000 years prior to that. But there are some cultural things and some suggestions that make certain scientists believe it was about 5,000.
Okay.
But still, 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that's not the oldest one. The oldest folktale was called The Smith and the Devil, which is about a blacksmith who sells his soul in a pact with the devil to gain supernatural abilities. I believe it's like the Metal Man from Terminator 2, where he can like turn into...
the T-1000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think in the story, he can weld any 2 substances together or maybe turn materials into whatever substance.
Wait. He still is being a blacksmith? Like he's doing this to be a better blacksmith?
I think that's the intention, yeah. Maybe I should have read the entire Smith and the Devil story.
You could be right. It's just that doesn't seem like a great idea.
Spoiler alert, the ending is that he welds the devil to a tree to get out of his end of the bargain, to avoid trying to sell his soul. So, first of all, why didn't Disney turn that into a movie?
No, that's
awesome. I guess Terminator.
Yeah.
There it is.
Is that Disney?
Not quite.
I don't know.
But anyways, so this Smith sells his soul to the devil. He gets these supernatural abilities. This story was traced back to the Bronze Age, over 6,000 years ago.
Wow.
So this story is not only awesome and sort of ahead of its time,
Yeah.
but it has been incredibly robust. And I don't know what cultures this story still exists in, because this was not one that was in my childhood storybook.
Oh, you didn't have this one?
Nope.
Well, so it is in sort of the American Southern cultural lexicon in the form of Devil Went Down to Georgia.
There it is. He was looking for a soul to steal.
Pretty much the same story, right?
It's similar, but you do have to remember that these studies were focused really intensely on Europe and Asia.
Oh, sure. Not Charlie Daniels Band.
Probably not.
Okay.
Charlie Daniels Band is the end stop for the Smith and the Devil story.
Yeah, it's realized its perfect form. Why would you change it?
But no, that was insane to me that this story existed, and it came about in the Bronze Age when I believe I'm going to pronounce the word wrong. Metallurgy, which is like the ability to work with metals, was brand new. So some ancient person developed the ability to work with metals and was like, I have an active imagination. Let me tell you this story. I sold my soul to the devil, and then I welded his ass to a tree. I love it.
That's a great story.
This is one of those things where 50% of me wishes that I could live in those times.
50%, that much?
Yeah, I'd have to be a man, because there's no way I'm going back as a woman.
Obviously.
But the other 50% of me is like appendicitis, penicillin.
Yeah.
modern medicine,
Right.
it'd be pretty rough.
Yeah. Average life expectancy is like 30 years.
Okay, that's not how that works, though. Sidestep again. The old average life expectancy, so when you see like in the Middle Ages, the life expectancy was 30 years old.
Uh-huh.
What they mean is that's the average. So because so many children died in childbirth, which is an age of 0,
Yeah.
and so many young women died in childbirth between the ages of 16 and 25, it really pulled down the average. If you could survive childhood and birth, you could live to an average age of 75.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's just so many people died young that the average age was 35.
It's good. I mean, I didn't really know that, but I understand.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
And it's important because we aren't the end-all be-all of human civilization. We're not a million times better than our ancestors because...
Wait. I'm going to have to stop you right there.
You can't see me, but I am rolling my eyes. Reese, you might be the pinnacle of human design.
Well, can't argue there.
The rest of us, though, we're just trying to get by. Now, the last little bit I want to talk about is the wormhole that I went down after reading about that paper and the Age of Stories. And where this led me was to other studies that focused on particular myths. So there was a recent study that found flood myths among Aboriginal Australians are traced back to actual sea level rises 7,000 years ago. Now that might sound familiar if you follow the Christian faith, because there was a time 6,000 years ago, I want to say, in the Mesopotamia area where there were big floods, huge floods that were completely unexpected and had been unseen prior to this time. And the flood myth is one of the biggest stories in Christianity, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the first for sure.
Right. So again, that led me down another wormhole into stories that are in the Christian Bible. And if those could be traced back to stories before Christianity. Because obviously these stories that we're talking about, Beauty and the Beast, Rumpelstiltskin, all of these stories existed long before the Bible did. 500 to 3,500 years before the Bible existed. Which to me, a little light bulb went off in my brain that said there's probably a lot of stories in the Christian Bible and probably in the Torah and the Quran that came from deeply cultural stories.
Stepping on some toes here, Kels.
Yes. I apologize to anybody who follows these faiths, and I don't mean to upset anybody's faith or attack anybody's faith. I think everybody has a right to their own faith.
Yeah.
This was just something really interesting to me. So, the biblical version of the flood is a rewritten version of a Sumerian myth. And this myth of the flood and even the ark was probably passed along to Jews during their Babylonian exile, which is historically proven that there was a Jewish exile in about the 6th century BC. But this all served as the basis of the Genesis story. Now, I'm not going to go super into this because, like I said, it was super interesting to me, and I think I'd like to do a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the other stories. Will you give me sort of like a big Christian story?
Big Christian story.
Yeah,
Okay.
like one of the top 5 stories that everybody, whether they are Christian or not, probably knows from the Christian Bible.
I'm blanking.
Maybe start with a holiday that's deeply religious that is coming up next month.
Are you talking about Easter?
I'm talking about Easter.
Okay.
So Easter, and this is something where I was reading a lot of religious texts and commentary from religious leaders about these things. What I learned about Easter is that it is based on a pagan festival that celebrates the goddess Esther or Ostara. Now, these goddesses are the goddesses of renewal and springtime, and the intention is to have a feast tied to the spring equinox. So in contemporary Christian culture, Easter falls on the first Sunday after a full moon after the vernal equinox. So that's why...
Really?
Yeah.
That's why it's so weird.
That's why it can range.
Yeah.
Very wildly. It can, I think the earliest it can be is like March 22nd or 23rd.
Yeah.
And the latest it can be is April 20 something. And
Yeah.
I think this year it's April 21st.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really late this year.
Right. Because it is based on these deep pagan traditions.
Interesting.
Things like the spring equinox, a time of rebirth, a time of rejuvenation, and full moons, which again are really indicative of harvests and plentiful bounties and things like that.
I was going to say it sounds like it's similar to the flip side of like a harvest festival.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Now, these pagan festivals go back thousands of years. It has been definitively traced to 2000 BC, so 2000 years before Jesus Christ existed. But there are a lot of theories that it goes back way farther than that, especially when considering Sumerian cultures. Now, the goddesses Esther and Ostara are relatively more current in history, in cultural history, in relation to the Bible. They still precede the birth of Jesus Christ, but they are much later than a lot of Sumerian cultures. So it's possible that the Easter celebration could have come from even further back cultures.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Further back than Sumerian.
Yeah.
Wow.
Although Sumerian culture does seem to be sort of the starting point of a lot of cultural aspects in Europe and Asia and Africa, of course.
Crazy.
Right. Give me another biblical story.
Jonah and the whale?
I got nothing on Jonah and the whale, and I knew you were going to bring that one
Really?
up.
That's such a bummer.
I know, but also Jonah in the whale is such a weird story because it's literally just guy got eaten by a whale, lived there for 3 days.
Yeah. Well,
Good times.
It's longer than that, but the rest of it is just details.
Right.
What about...
Go back to the beginning.
How about the creation?
Oh, crap. I have so much about the creation. So we're going to talk a little bit, the creation of Earth you're talking about, correct? And
Yeah.
like the universe.
Yeah, the center of the universe.
Right. Again, dates back to a Sumerian myth and Sumerian religions where the god, whose name I can't remember, was born, and then the god created Earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. The god commanded his people to go out and to tend the earth, and it started with 2 people. Humanity started with 2 people. And that brings me to Persian. There's also a lot of Persian cultural stories that have made their way and adapted and come to the Bible. In the Persian scripture of the Zoroastrians, who Zoroastrianism, as far as I can tell, was a pretty big religion that just predated Christianity. So Zoroastrianism has a lot of similarities with Christianity. A lot.
Except for a much cooler name.
Right. Very sci-fi. Love it.
Yeah, it is.
In the scriptures of Zoroastrians, the Avesta tells the story of how Ormuzd, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, you're looking at me like I know. And I do not.
I never know what you can know.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about, where Ormuzd created the world and the first 2 humans in 6 days and then rested on the 7th. The names of these 2 human beings in Zoroastrianism were Adama, which meant a man, and Eva.
Those sound vaguely familiar.
It's off-brand Adam and Eve. Or is Adam and Eve off-brand Adama and Eva?
Yeah. Dr. Thunder, Mountain Lightning, whatever,
Right.
whatever those are.
Whatever the off-brand.
The Walmart.
I think Mountain Mist.
Is it Mountain Mist?
I don't know. I don't drink pop.
We're
You
the
look at
wrong
me like
people
I'm going to
to
know. Now, this these texts and these tablets date back as far as the 10th century BC. So that's 8,000 years-ish before the creation myth exists in Christianity. These are all just a number of accounts of many, many more, which show examples of dying and rising gods. So I said that it's sort of cyclical. I know if you have sort of a traditional Christian upbringing, there was Genesis, and then a bunch of stuff happened, and then Jesus came. That's relatively unique to Christianity, although, like I said, it does exist in Zoroastrianism, and also I believe it exists in the Sumerian myth. But these stories are all very cyclical. There was birth, Eve, Eva. In the story of Eva, she also ate an apple from a tree and was tricked by a snake. These stories represent birth, and then there is an aspect of rebirth later on in the story. So, like I said, these accounts are just a couple of examples of dying and rising and rebirth and all of these wonderful things that historically represented the cycle of the seasons.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
You're right. So the dying is the entrance into winter, and 3 days could easily be 3 months as you live through this really difficult time, and then the spring comes and the bounty is relatively plentiful. Things like eggs, which are signs of birth and rebirth, appear, and that's a good mechanism for you to know that the winter is almost over, which is why we paint Easter eggs. In some Orthodox Christian religions, eggs have a lot of really important cultural significance. Rabbits are also another thing that begins to appear at this time of year. There's a lot of really interesting history around rabbits that I'm not going to go into right now. But again, things that tie Easter, the religious holiday in Christianity, to Easter, the cultural, historical, pagan celebration.
Interesting.
Now, I'm a little bit all over the place because there's so much information here, and I don't want to give away too much so that you come back and you listen to me tell the full versions of these stories. But I just want to give a couple more examples of resurrection stories. The Egyptian Horus dies and is resurrected. The story of Mithras, who I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but died and was resurrected, and who was worshipped at springtime. The tale of Dionysus, who was resurrected by his grandmother. And among these stories are these prevailing themes of fertility, of conception, of renewal, the descent into darkness, and the triumph of light over that darkness. It is this dichotomy of good and evil. It's what we continue to see. And I would say that most major religions have aspects of this in their dogma and in their cultural lexicon.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like a lot of the themes throughout the stories are very, I mean, you kind of said this earlier, but it seems like a lot of the plot lines and themes throughout the stories are very similar, just kind of in a different order or in different context.
Right. Which makes sense because as groups took these really important cultural stories and then adapted, became new groups, developed new ideas, they still wanted to keep these really important moral lessons and these really culturally important celebrations of things like rebirth in the Easter and the springtime, plentiful, you've survived the winter feast.
Interesting. You ready?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just hoping that your topic today doesn't upset large people groups.
No, my topic's pretty neutral.
Cool. Mine are never neutral.
No.
I intend them to be neutral, and then we get started and off they go.
You know what, though? They are really interesting.
Good. Hopefully all of our listeners agree.
Yeah. And if not, I'm sure they won't be our listeners for long. So.
There's only like 20 of you.
Yeah.
Please hang in there.
Yeah, hang on. We can't afford to lose you. I'm only kidding.
Anyways, tell me about your topic. Reese has been so excited to share this topic with me. So I'm so happy that we have gotten here.
I know. I've been throughout the last few days, up to a week probably.
Yeah.
I've known what I'm going to do. And through researching it, interesting facts keep coming up that I just want to tell you about. But I can't because we have to talk about it organically in the podcast. For
our listeners, I just want to share a quick story of Reese sitting on the couch and listening to videos about this topic. And every 30 seconds to 5 minutes, depending on where he was at in a video, he would just go, oh. And then he'd pull his headphones off and he'd say, "This is so cool."
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to share those videos so you'll all know why I think they're so awesome. Hopefully you think they're as cool as I do. But they're nuts, especially in context.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So up till this point, we've been talking about frequencies and resonance, things having to do with sound and waves and that sort of thing. Today is kind of in a way, kind of the culmination of at least some of that. And we're going to be talking about mechanical resonance.
All right.
Yes. So mechanical resonance is the tendency of a mechanical system to respond at a greater amplitude when the frequency of its oscillations matches the system's natural frequency of vibration.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Is that like when you slam a tuning fork and it vibrates everything around it?
Yeah.
Or two tuning forks next to each other?
Yes. Yeah. So that's everything. Every physical thing has a natural frequency at which it vibrates.
I have a question already.
Oh my God. Okay.
Do humans?
Yeah.
What is ours?
Okay. Well, I mean, humans aren't just one solid object, so they have more than one.
Dang.
You're getting ahead of me a little bit here, though.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm coming back to that. Don't worry.
Cool.
It's a great question. So the first thing to understand is resonance frequency. That's the frequency at which any given object likes to vibrate.
We're all vibrating. We're all vibing.
We're vibing. So everything has that resonance frequency at which it likes to vibrate. So if you think of a wine glass, think of when you ping a wine glass, you can hear the tone. Now, that's not going to be true with every object. Like if you hit a wood block, it's not necessarily going to make a noise that you perceive as a tone, but some things will. So for the demonstration, the wine glass is a really good object because you flick it or you ping it and it vibrates, it makes a noise. That is the frequency at which it likes to vibrate. This is why you'll see videos sometimes of people breaking wine glasses using their voice. Have you ever
Right.
Yeah. So if you ping it, it makes that frequency.
Just with my voice. If you ping it, it makes that frequency.
And then you can match that, and at loud enough amplitude, you can break it because you are causing that wine glass to vibrate and not in harmony, but in sympathy with the tone that you're producing. And if you produce it loudly enough, it can cause it to vibrate so violently that the wine glass breaks.
Wow, I always wondered.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Insane.
So there's a really cool video that I'm going to link. A guy by the name of Mike Boyd has a YouTube channel, and he demonstrates his process of learning how to do this and why it works. There's also a visual demonstration of the idea of resonance frequency through an object called the Rubens tube.
It sounds like you stumbled over Rubik's Cube.
I know it does. It sounds. That's why I had to double check my notes to make sure I didn't accidentally say Rubik's Cube. But
the Rubens tube.
Rubens tube. There's a guy named Heinrich Rubens who invented this thing. Basically what it is a tube. Could have guessed that, probably. And you equally space these little holes on the top of it. It's closed off at the end, and on one end it's like a solid cover, wood most of the time, I think. And then on the other end, there's like a rubber membrane. And you fill the chamber with gas, basically, and you tap or you put a speaker up against the membrane so that it's producing pulses into the tube.
Into the gases.
Into the gases, right. Which is essentially a visual demonstration of a wave. And the way that you can actually see it is when you light the gas on fire, little flames are coming out of this tube. So you see it, and if you change the frequency, you can actually see that the flames look like a wave. And if you measure that, that gives you the wavelength. So it's crazy. It gives you a really concrete idea of conceptually what a wave acts like and what it looks like.
Side note, all of your stories have people with the coolest names.
Are you talking about Heinrich Rubens?
Yeah, and the guy from the last one, Mossbauer?
Yeah.
Neat.
Felix, I think, Mossbauer.
That's wrong.
Is it?
I have no idea.
I thought it was Felix. You're right. That sounds wrong. Can't believe I forgot his name already. Unbelievable. So the Rubens tube, anyway, check it out. It might give you an idea of how that frequency is visualized and how it interacts with the object. Apparently Nikola Tesla was pretty big into this kind of thing. He even made a machine that allegedly, he claimed, caused earthquakes. And I know, there's a story about how he caused an earthquake from his Soho lab in New York City and how it almost brought the building down. I don't know if that's been substantiated. It seems kind of like folklore.
Editorialized, perhaps.
Right, yeah. But he claimed the machine could produce vibrations that were so powerful that they could bring down a building. He even specifically said if it had enough power, it could bring down the Empire State Building.
Now, I have a quick question regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
A building doesn't have one resonance frequency.
So, that is true.
Also was not a question, sorry.
No, that's okay. I see what you're getting at. And that's a great point. Because that's kind of what I thought. There's multiple materials in the building that could potentially be vibrating. That's what brings us back to when we talked about the harmonic series, where every tone that's produced is not just made up of that one tone or one frequency, it's made up of multiple frequencies. So there might be frequencies in that building that sympathize with certain frequencies in that single tone, and there might be other frequencies that sympathize with other harmonics within that same tone that's being produced. Theoretically, that could take down the building.
All I'm hearing is that you could take down a human with the right frequency.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just wait. So a great example of this is suspension bridges. There's a long history of bridges collapsing because of this phenomenon, which apparently is why soldiers, when they cross a bridge, they break step, so they don't march in unison. Because, what were you about to say?
There's a Mythbusters episode on that.
There is, yeah, which is great. You should check it out. There are a few specific examples of when that happened. The Angers Bridge in, I think, France is probably the most popular. The soldiers were walking across it, and I think it was a windy day too, and the combination of all of that and the bridge's natural frequency caused it to collapse, which is crazy. More recently, in 1940, I think it was, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge is another great example of that, where the wind just caused it to violently start fluctuating and the bridge collapsed. I think there's even video of that one.
I feel like I've seen video of that, although I could be mixing it up with the first scene of Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, well, okay, it's funny that you bring that up because that's the Millennium Bridge in London, and it didn't collapse, but, I mean, in the movie it does, spoiler alert. But that they've actually had, in real life, they've had trouble with that, fluctuating so much because of the wind.
So the wind even has the ability to resonate at the same frequency.
Yeah.
Or is it just that the wind compounds the existing frequency in the bridge and amplifies it?
It's that. It's essentially, it's hard to think about in terms of the wind, but sound, the frequency of sound is essentially pulses of air.
Makes sense.
Right? So when the wind is blowing in a specific way, that potentially could match the natural frequency that the bridge resonates, cause it to fluctuate so violently, and bring it down, just like the wine glass. Which is crazy, right? That the wind can do that?
The wind is a very powerful force. The only thing more powerful than wind is water, rushing water.
Yeah.
And that could be because I watched a documentary about erosion when I was like 12 and kind of impressionable. And they used sort of alarmist language to talk about like Arches National Park and all of those things that have been shaped by the wind over millions of years. And in my head, I was like, dang, the wind is crazy.
The wind is crazy. Water's crazy. It's all crazy.
Nature's scary.
Nature's freaky. But bridges, suspension bridges, from my understanding, the idea is to be able to offset that. And in most cases, they do it really successfully. You think of the Golden Gate Bridge. That hasn't, to my knowledge, hasn't ever collapsed. And I think more modern suspension bridges especially are much more resilient to that because I think now they have a tendency to factor that in, that there might be that factor. And a lot of it comes from that Tacoma Narrows Bridge.
Wow. Yeah.
So that leads us to the idea of infrasound, where, you're familiar with this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I love ghosts.
Yeah.
And the suggestions as to what may be causing ghostly feelings and behaviors and those fun things.
All right, we'll save it because we're here getting ahead still.
I'm so excited to hear about how I can take down a human with a speaker.
Oh my gosh.
That isn't just bashing them over the head with it.
You're not going to learn that here. So I hate to break it to you.
Tune out now, folks.
Okay. So infrasound, for those of you who don't know, is below it. Their frequency is below the ability of the human ear to detect, which is 20 hertz and below. Anything below that, we can't. Our ears physically can't perceive it.
However, we are able to feel it, correct?
Yes. So this is where the infamous brown note comes from. Supposedly that's between 5 and 9 hertz. Totally unsubstantiated.
If you don't know what the brown note is, it's the belief that there is a frequency with which you can play to a human body and it will result in the human being soiling themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Which is a humorous notion, but like I said, totally unsubstantiated. Now, in this range of infrasound, there's a note known as the ghost frequency. Ooh.
I'm so excited.
I know. So this is about 18.98 hertz, which is roughly the vibration, the resonance frequency of the human eye. So the human eye vibrates at about 18.9 hertz.
Holy cow.
Right? This causes the phenomenon known as ocular resonance.
That does not sound comfortable.
No, it's really not. I'm including a video that there are some YouTube videos that produce that frequency, And the idea is that it causes you to like see ghosts. That's why it's called the ghost frequency. Sometimes maybe it does. There have been reports of hallucinations. Really, for pretty much everybody, there have been studies conducted where pretty much everybody involved in the study felt uneasiness and felt like in certain cases you could feel your eyes vibrating.
I hate it.
I know, isn't it? It's the worst.
Could you explode a human eyeball?
I don't know. Maybe.
If the frequency was
Why
loud
are you
enough.
trying to weaponize this?
I'm just trying to prepare us for what the evil people in the world might try to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Do not worry, the YouTube video will not explode your eyes.
No, it doesn't explode your eyes. But it does make you uneasy. Absolutely. That was part of my oohs and ahs yesterday as I sat through it for a couple minutes. And it does make you pretty unsettled, and I could feel my eyes shaking, and it's weird. It's really bizarre. So I'll share it. If you feel inclined, check it out. It's pretty crazy. But there's a great example of this phenomenon being demonstrated through a guy named Vic Tandy. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No, but again, awesome name.
Right? Vic Tandy.
He sounds like a PI in a movie from the 80s.
Yeah, right. Or like a NASCAR driver or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless, he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt unbuttoned halfway down.
Yes. In both of those scenarios.
Right.
Yeah. So
anyways,
Vic was a researcher at Warwick Castle, in the laboratory at Warwick Castle.
We're
Warwick.
really disrespecting Vic right now. He did some cool stuff.
He did. He did. I don't
I
know.
bet he had a sweet mustache.
I've seen pictures of him, and I don't know that he had a mustache in the picture, but that doesn't mean he didn't back then. We'll have to look into that. That's one for the corrections.
Yes, it is.
Did Vic Tandy have a sweet mustache?
I'm putting that on a t-shirt.
I'm just going to believe that he did.
He had to have.
Yeah. So he worked in a laboratory, and I want to say it's pronounced Warwick Castle because it's in England. But it could be Warwick. I don't know. I'm too American. Supposedly, this place is crazy haunted. So it's this place, and he was hired to do investigations into paranormal occurrences at this castle and at some other location in Britain. And his laboratory was set up in Warwick Castle. And he was working late one night, and he saw what looked like a spirit in his peripheral vision, like a gray blob, sort of a spirit. Your eyes just got huge.
I love it, but I hate it.
Yeah, I know. It's a little freaky. When he turned to look at it, it vanished. Like when he turned to look at it directly.
As they do.
So he got freaked out by that, believe it or not.
Poor Vic.
Goes home, and being a man of science, he's like, I wonder what's going on. So he was an avid fencer, too. He gets more interesting by the minute, doesn't
Vic
he?
is so cool.
I know, you're loving on Vic. He brings his fencing sword from home and secures it into a vise in the lab. And he noticed that even though he wasn't producing any sound or he wasn't moving the blade, it was vibrating on its own, which made him think that the laboratory had its own natural frequency that it was producing. Now, he traced this disruption to a fan that he had recently installed that oscillated at roughly, guess how much?
18.9.
Yeah. Yep. At roughly the ghost frequency, which apparently was also, I think he discovered this later on, the resonance frequency of the room and the castle.
Damn.
Right? So he's explaining this as sort of the cause of him seeing ghosts. So there are a lot of other experiments into this and a lot of other theories and situations where people are kind of giving their accounts. And it's one that's really difficult to lock down because it has different effects on different people, right? You know, everybody's body is different and they're going to have slightly different frequencies, resonance frequencies. But roughly, that's what it is. And it affected him in such a way that it freaked him out and he had to go home. So
My man Vic.
I know. So apparently, sound vibration can cause you to see ghosts. So maybe next time you see a ghost, it's not a ghost. It's
Infrasound.
infrasound. Check the fans.
That's one of those things where infrasound is so cool and interesting that ghost hunters now test for infrasound when they're in locations.
Do they really do
They
that?
do, because they want to make sure that what they're feeling and experiencing can't be chalked up to something like infrasound.
Sure. Got to keep it legit.
You got to keep your ghost hunting scientific.
Yes, absolutely. That's a scientific process if I've ever seen one. Yeah, so anyway, the information that I collected, a lot of it, my interest was sparked in this topic through a video put out by a guy named Adam Neely. He has a whole channel. A lot of it's music, but he talks about science behind some of this stuff. And he covers it in pretty decent depth, too. So I would recommend going and checking that out, as well as some of those other videos I mentioned earlier, because being able to experience it is really, it kind of gives you that mentality of what it was like, and it helps you, I think, identify when you're in a situation, when you're feeling uneasy for seemingly no reason. There are a lot of different reasons that could be, but potentially one of those things is infrasound.
Before we finish up your topic,
Yeah.
can we both listen to that video that you're going to post so that I can give a solid reaction to it?
Yeah. Let me pull it up here.
Friends, I'm not excited about this. I'm a little worried.
Yeah. We'll take a listen and then we'll be right back.
I did not like that.
No, I don't blame you.
There were tears, unintentional tears.
Yeah.
I felt a tightness in my chest. I got nauseous, which could be because I'm an anxious person.
It's not just that, though.
Right. Now, something really interesting, just to finish this up, infrasound is used really creatively now in our culture. So if you watch scary movies or like horror TV shows, they frequently use infrasound to give you that really uneasy feeling.
That's right. And you don't know why.
Right. So somebody's walking down a hallway and you feel like that shouldn't be a scary thing, and then you get really, really tense. And some of that is filmmaking. Some of it is the sounds that you can hear that are being played and sort of halting, strange melodies.
Right.
But I think a big contributor to that is the infrasound they just like stick in there.
Yeah, they do that intentionally because it adds to that tension and uneasiness that you might already be feeling.
Wow.
It's effective too. Just listening to it now. First of all, the freakiest thing to me is you can feel your eyeballs shaking, which is just unnatural.
Yeah, like I said, tears leaked out of my face.
Yeah.
Unintentionally.
Yeah, but you get this kind of sinking, at least I did, sinking in my chest.
Yeah.
And you feel uneasy. I still feel uneasy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's why that Tesla was so adamant that it could bring down a building, because vibrations are so powerful.
I believe him now.
Yeah.
I was skeptical about his destruction ray
Yeah.
of sound, but
I think the thing about that is a building is a pretty complex system, and it'd be tough to bring it down like that.
right.
But not impossible.
Wow. Well, let's hit our final piece of positive news. If you have not watched the video, but you want to listen and watch the video with the infrasound, do that now and then come back to us and hear the happiness. Because you don't want to come away from this podcast today feeling weird and uncomfortable.
No.
Okay, welcome back. So my final feel-good story of our final podcast of our first sub-series is that renewable energy is getting to be so affordable. In the second half of 2018 alone, the global benchmark levelized cost for solar fell by 14%. 14% in under 6 months, the cost fell. And the wind benchmark fell by 6%. Now, those may not seem like large numbers, but the thought is that these are going to continue to drop. And it's going to reach a point where renewable energy is just going to be too dang cheap to not implement. We are at a point now where building new solar plants and building new renewable energy plants and retraining people who work at coal plants is less expensive than maintaining fossil fuel plants.
Wow.
Yeah. So here's some great news for you. In the next 5 years, it's possible that you could easily put solar panels on your house. It's well within likelihood, and that you could be completely off the grid.
That's super cool. I'm hoping the Tesla batteries come down too.
Me too.
I could definitely get behind something like that.
Well, cool. That is all we have for you today. Remember, this is our last content-driven episode, but we do still have another corrections episode coming out before we take a little bit of a break. Thank you so much for being with us through our first season as we're figuring things out, as we offend a lot of people accidentally, as we cry because our eyeballs are vibrating.
Yeah.
It's been a wild, fun, crazy ride.
It really has. Yeah.
And we couldn't do it without the support of all of you. So thank you.
No, that's absolutely true. Thank you so much for your support. And continue to listen. You know, if you like what we do, we love doing it and we want to keep putting content out. So please support us so that we can keep doing it.
Yeah. If we have any artists in the group, please draw Vic Tandy for us. I will pay you to get a t-shirt with Vic Tandy's face on it.
Now, I feel like I have to step in here because if he doesn't have a mustache in real life...
Oh, he has to have one in the drawing.
Artist rendering needs to have a mustache. So please do. That would be so amazing.
Once again, I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Reese.
And this was Charismatic Megafauna.